Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Adam Fuggit, of asking you to walk me to my trug so you can sug it. Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you following UFC 324. Fights are back after 6-8 weeks. How long was it? It was a long time. It felt like an eternity. But we have fights on again, and honestly, mixed bag, because there was a lot of stuff that was just really silly happening this week going into this Paramount deal. But on the plus side, the main event, which was kind of a laughingstock when it was signed, turned out to be a bit of a banger. I really was impressed by this. Not like there are types of impressed. I think because I'm a guy who's like, oh, these are the X's and O's of fighting. I think people expect me to be like, well, this was sloppy, this was bad. But there was a lot about this fight that did impress me, even though it was a bit of a sloppy mess. There were a couple of other cool fights on the card. There was some shite, because there always is. But it was off to a bad start because we just come over to Paramount from ESPN. So the UFC has booked 3 good events and is then going to return to just absolute rubbish at the apex. But was it the first fighter who weighed in? Cameron Smotherman, who I believe was on the first fight of the card, weighed in, walked off the scale. As he's walking, he just face plants into the floor. Which, if you're familiar with MMA, long-term problem. People be collapsing on the scale all the time. Very rarely do they walk off the scale like, no, guys, I'm fine, I've got it, and then just go bang straight into the floor. But it was the first part of this new broadcasting deal. They were showing the weigh-ins, and this lad just, it was bad. And the crazy thing is, they cancelled the fight, which was good, but you'll remember 6 months ago, was it, it might have been August 2025, Brian Ortega passed out apparently for half an hour. All the fighters at the hotel said, there's an ambulance here. They were all on Twitter. Marab, who was the teammate and was there with Aljo, who was fighting Brian Ortega, was there going, there's an ambulance at the hotel. Everyone watched Brian Ortega be taken to the hospital. Then they cleared him to fight anyway. Luckily, because Cameron Smotherman passed out on a broadcast, they didn't let this go ahead. But MMA is so crazy that he could have won the fight, and then no one would have learned anything. I don't know if we've got anyone new in today, because I don't think this card will have won over many new MMA fans, but this is a constant problem in MMA, the idea of weight cutting, because when you divide sports by weight class, everyone wants to be as big as humanly possible on the night, so you try and dry yourself out for the weigh-ins. I've seen a lot of suggested fixes for this. None of them so far have been particularly good. One championship allegedly does hydration testing, but sometimes they do and sometimes they don't seem to. So you've got guys over there like Nico Carrillo who are just fucking enormous, and the hydration testing is clearly not working as intended. In boxing, the IBF, I think, is the only governing body out of the 4 that insists on a mandatory rehydration to a certain weight. So you're weighed in again after your weigh-in, so like 8 hours later, 12 hours later, or whatever it is. And then in MMA, you got guys going like, well, we should do it by height class. That's stupid. We can have DC fight Max Holloway in the 5'9" class. But anyway, we got to the card. It was decent. Let's talk about the main event. Justin Gaethje, Paddy Pimblett. If you missed it, I put out a video. It was technically in the Slackies Film Room series, but I've stopped putting that in titles now because it seems to kill the algorithm, or kill me on the algorithm. It was just called How Justin Gaethje Uppercuts Everyone. And it was a video about how he does that deep slip to his right side, slaps the guy so that his hand sticks to their head, and throws the uppercut. Or sometimes he jabs and they move their head and then he grabs it and throws the uppercut. That's a Rob Font favourite. He's very good at that. Lennox Lewis was very good at that in boxing gloves, which is quite hard to do. And it was an 11-minute video. Probably about 6 minutes was how Gaethje does this. Then I talked about how how to make it not work. So I said Dustin Poirier was southpaw, so it's kind of hard to get it going against him. And then I said Max Holloway did these things. So the uppercut across the body, timing that well. The body kicks and right straights to the body on Gaethje's left side, where he's always reaching with that hand. The back kick to the head when he ducked in, punishing him for ducking that way. And so in that video, we also showed Rafael Fiziev. Gaethje used it against him loads in their 2 fights, but it was like night and day. When Fiziev was standing southpaw and Gaethje did that deep slip to the left, he got kicked or kneed in the head, And when Fiziev was standing orthodox, Gaethje would slip past his lead shoulder, get hit with nothing, and come up with the uppercut. And this fight against Paddy Pimblett was 100% Justin Gaethje getting completely blinkered. You know, he had the tunnel vision. I'm going to slip to my right, grab his head, and then either uppercut him or throw the overhand. And he did that for 25 minutes. And he honestly took a lot of shots because he was doing that. So before we get deep into like the technical stuff, I do want to say Gaethje did look like a 38-year-old man. He's had this weird thing on his neck for 2 weeks, and everyone's been saying it's staph infection, and he's been very angrily saying it's not staph infection. It probably is staph infection. Where were we? Nevada? Yeah, they'll let you compete with staph. Well, to be honest, there's shit doctors everywhere who let you compete with staph, but he looked slow and old. Paddy Pimblett, meanwhile, he lost this fight in the way that I expected, but not in the way that I expected. So if you listen to the boycast, I'll quickly run you through. My brief thoughts on this were Paddy Pimblett has bad takedowns. He hangs on the single leg like Sakuraba and, you know, just does not convert them very well. He takes a lot of punishment to get a takedown. When he's fighting on the feet, he's good at kicking from long range, but he also gives a very obvious step into his low kicks. So he gets blasted with the right hands on one leg quite a lot. When he gets pressure to the fence, even against people like Tony Ferguson, if you walk at him, he backs himself onto the fence, doesn't realize he's against the fence until it's too late, and then tries to swing his way off with his chin up in the air. I thought that would spell disaster against Gaethje. I thought he's going to get backed onto the cage. He's not going to be able to take Gaethje down. He's going to panic because he's against the cage, swing with his chin up in the air, get hit by one of the hardest hitters in the history of the division, and that'll be all she wrote. And it was up until that last bit correct, and then Paddy Pimblett was just like, "Nah, mate, I'm not gonna be knocked out, thanks." He got knocked down twice, once in each of the first 2 rounds. But aside from that, he was just like tanking these punches on his chin in bad position and coming back with punches of his own. So I gained a lot of respect for. I mean, I always respected him because he was a decent fighter who did a lot to work on himself and try and hide. He tried to fix his boxing, and then he tried to work around his boxing, and I respect that a lot too, because that's, you know, you've got to say, like, I'm not going to be a great boxer at any point, and I'll just build my game to try and hide that or work around it. But I gained an awful lot more respect for him in this one because, as I mentioned on the Patreon episode, that this brief stint of wins over named opponents reminded me of the Dominic Reyes comeback last year, where I think it was 3 knockouts in a row or 3 good wins in a row, and people were like, it was a debate between whether he's back or the division is just so shit. And I said that and this are likely a case of a bit of both, but probably more that the division's bad. Yet Pimblett got in here with a really world-class lightweight, much better than the guys he's been fighting, coming off a win over Fiziev, where he looked really good. He was, capital T technical Justin Gaethje, and he looked good in that fight. And Pimblett clearly lost, but gave a great fight. So big respect to him. Let's talk about the technical shit. Gaethje slipping deep to his left, trying to grab the head, come back with the overhand or the uppercut with his right hand. Pimblett starts timing him with left knees, like Fiziev did, right uppercuts across the body, like Max Holloway did. And if you think of this, stand in your stance, orthodox, to hit the guy when he's in a deep lean that way, you've got to throw like a long right uppercut to about 11 o'clock, which is why it's a really awkward punch to throw. Teofimo Lopez did a really cool variation of this against Lomachenko, where he'd slide his lead foot back as he rotated his hips and sort of retreat a bit to make more distance to slide that uppercut through. But if you're doing it against a guy in a deep slip like this, you need to really get the timing down because it's a big movement to uppercut across yourself, and you're making yourself quite vulnerable. And Paddy was really throwing it long, like his chin's up in the air, he's throwing a big uppercut, other hand down by his waist. It's funny because when I put that video up, my boy William from Open Note Grappling tweeted, "But who's got the better form on the uppercut?" and attached a picture of Paddy throwing this ridiculous uppercut with the other hand down from one of his fights. And that same uppercut, he just cracked Justin Gaethje with like a dozen times in this fight. And the other thing he did with this that I really liked was from orthodox against the orthodox Gaethje, he would throw his jab and switch feet. So a drop shift or a cheap punch, depending if you're stepping with it or you're switching on the spot. But then he'd throw the right uppercut from the switched position. So a southpaw right uppercut. which actually helped him sneak it in a bit more. There were a couple of those where he jacked Gaethje's head right back. But there were also a couple where he got cracked in return because he was doing a switch right in front of his man. So you make yourself very vulnerable. But that's really interesting because that is a technique that's quite popular right now in Japanese kickboxing. But uppercuts in kickboxing are sort of thrown towards the opponent. They're not thrown up. They're thrown like rising, like a plane taking off. Because everyone's so upright. So you'll see a lot of Japanese kickboxers from orthodox go jab with the switch step, southpaw right uppercut, left high kick or left body kick. But in this instance, Paddy's throwing that right uppercut to like 11 o'clock because Gaethje's doing the deep slip. So same technique but different and different application. Anyway, getting way too in the weeds there. When Gaethje got him to the fence, Paddy would like duck in. Honestly, again, like Sakuraba. He used to wear the Sakuraba shorts, which is why he now has the orange shorts, the orange custom shorts. They really just look like a red pair they left out in the sun too long. But if you go back to Paddy's Cage Warriors career, he always wore the orange shorts with white, with ICS in white on the back, and it's actually supposed to be KS, but the Japanese just made it look like ICS, and that was Kazushi Sakuraba's shorts. And he used to shoot low on these singles an awful lot, and sometimes he'd get beat up because he was competing in Pride, where you were allowed to knee the head when the guy, like, think of the number of times that Paddy ended up on all fours in front of Gaethje in this fight, and Gaethje's having to like sort of hold, well, Paddy's holding one of his wrists so he can't get it free, and he's having to try and punch Paddy in a legal way when there aren't a lot of legal targets there. Sakuraba was doing that stuff when you could knee him in the top of the head or stand up and soccer kick him. So absolute animal, Sakuraba. But in his 2 fights in the UFC, he was in the UFC Japan tournament. He fought Marcus Silveira, Conan Silveira, who is now one of the chief coaches at American Top Team. His son's very good in PFL. And Conan Silveira is like 250 pounds, and Sakuraba is a chubby welterweight. Sakuraba gets backed up against the cage. Silveira is swinging on him, and Sakuraba covers up and then dives low for the ankle. And John McCarthy stepped in and stopped it. And then later in the tournament, whoever got injured, they had to bring Sakuraba in. They re-examined the footage of the stoppage, and they called it a no contest. And then Sakuraba went on to beat Conan Silveira by armbar, which was crazy because like Conan Silveira was a legit black belt with like 50 pounds on him. But yeah, there's a lot of Sakuraba in Paddy Pimblett, and you saw that when he was like diving after Gaethje's legs and just ending up underneath, in the turtle basically, with Gaethje on the front headlock punching him in the head. And I did look at that and go, I really wish we had knees to the head on the ground. It would make everything so much more interesting. Because whenever you bring up knees to the head on the ground, people go, well, that would just make wrestlers more dominant. But really, it gives both people something to do. There were loads of guys who would get stuck in bottom side control and just start kneeing the head from the bottom. Think about that time that Conor McGregor did the massive illegal knee from the bottom against Khabib. I think Khabib was on a Kimura grip. But yeah, Khabib was offended by it being illegal. But he really got blasted in the head. It does distract you, and that gives people chances to start working. Anyway, other cool stuff in this fight. I mean, Gaethje, eventually, by like round 3, he starts throwing the odd low kick. And I saw someone point out, he seems to be in his Jose Aldo phase now, because there was about 10 years of UFC events where every Jose Aldo fight, Joe Rogan would be banging on about how great his low kicks are. And he'd say, but he hasn't thrown any in this fight. And you're like, Joe, you've called his last 7 fights and he's never thrown one. Why are you still surprised by this? But then one day Aldo brought them back. And you know, whenever he did bring them back, you go, damn, that dude can kick. He had a bad experience against the Korean Zombie where he kicked and just caught the top of his foot, like right down by the toes on the Korean Zombie's kneecap. And his foot just like explodes. And he fights the rest of the fight with his foot as a balloon. And that's where you can really see that he stopped throwing it. But Gaethje started throwing some low kicks, started trying to jab a bit, started trying to land that counter left hook that he does where he slaps the guy with the left hook and tries to pivot off at the same time. And he'd get jabbed every time and he'd rock Paddy back onto his heels with this left hook. And Paddy would just be like, no, that's fine, and keep going. The man's chin should be studied. I'm starting to think that horrible posture is the secret to a good chin, because people like him, Gegard Mousasi, guys who go to the weigh-ins and they have that like slumped over, head out, really sticking the Adam's apple out there, and then they can just take amazing punches in really bad boxing position. Positive Mousasi mention to kick off the first podcast of the year. Paddy had a really good third round, actually, picked it up. Oh, he was using a lovely triangle kick, Sankakugeri, with his lead foot, which is lead foot, ball of the foot, throw it not front kick styly, but up on an angle, like 45 degrees or less, towards the liver. Robbie Lawler used to throw these in MMA. Tekeru almost TKO'd Superlek. Was that last year or the year before? Got his ass kicked in that fight for most of the 5 rounds, but almost knocked Superlek out with this one kick that just made him bend double. And Paddy was having great fun with that here. You can do it with a step up, or you can do it just sort of like gliding in, hopping on one foot. One thing that was really interesting was that I really like Justin Gaethje's dirty boxing. He's one of the few guys who like forces the clinch in order to hit people, but he forces the clinch and then he hits them on the break. It's always that right hand coming across the top on the break. Paddy was actually doing some good striking with Gaethje holding him against the cage. When Gaethje was holding his head, he's landing elbows, landing good knees. And a good knee with your back to the fence is something that I really love to see. Really rare in MMA. But a couple of the guys I know for being good at it also coincidentally are some of the best fighters ever. So Demetrius Johnson, Islam Makhachev are the two I immediately think of, who they would put their back to the fence and they wouldn't have a lot of power in the knee because they're not in a good stance. Their feet are like right under them. But they'll pick the knee up and they'll point it right in to the liver or under the bottom rib. They'll just point it in at a perfect angle and nudge the guy in the ribs. So it's only like the power of the hip flexor, basically. It's not like a full-bodied holding the bag skip knee thing. But you can watch guys get visibly uncomfortable as soon as they land. And that's how both those guys, Makhachev and DJ, used to set up their escapes when they had their back to the fence. They'd knee the guy until he got a little bit pissed off or distracted, and then they'd make their move. So Gaethje won this pretty comfortably. Paddy got round 3. I think there was another one you could have given him, but he had a lot of moments, but he pretty decisively lost rounds 1 and 2, and I think round 5 as well. I don't think anyone's scoring it for Paddy. I was impressed by him. I'm impressed by Gaethje because I reckon he probably did have something wrong with him, staff-wise. Kind of depressed by like the complete lack of variety to his game. I'm always begging Justin Gaethje to throw a fucking body shot. I mean, Trevor Whitman was in his corner begging him to throw a fucking body shot. I beg Justin Gaethje to throw jabs, and when he does that, I'm happy enough. And he threw a few jabs in this fight at last, but his fights with Fiziev, you can watch him just turn the jab on for about a minute in each fight, and it looks great. But I went and looked at the stats for this, and just in, Fight Metric, as it used to be, now UFC stats, it has a bar chart representing the landing, the landed strikes of each fighter, and Gaethje's is always almost entirely the head with maybe a bit of legs on it. He landed 83% to the head, 6% to the legs, so almost no low kicks thrown, 10% to the body, and I think those were by accident or when he had him down on the mat and he was punching, the body just because there was nothing else there. Justin Gaethje with the body shot would be phenomenal. And the body shot sets up so much of this shit, which brings us on to Arnold Allen versus Jean Silva, which I thought would be a banger. But Jean Silva did amazing work off switching to southpaw and going right hook to the body, left straight to the head. Now, orthodox versus orthodox, that would be left hook to the body, right straight to the head. That combination works stunningly well. And any MMA fighter who discovers it, it immediately becomes one of their favourites. So Douglas Silva d'Andrade was a top 15 bantamweight for a while. Not good at really anything. Just in great condition. Well, great at weight cutting and great at being in condition. But that was his one combination. And he really did trouble a lot of guys with it. But it works to the highest levels. Like Roberto Duran in boxing used to jab and dip. Go read the article that I just published on the Patreon about that. But he'd jab and dip, and then one of his favourite follow-ups was to throw the left hook to the body and come with the right straight to the head. Because the left hook to the body freezes people. They'll cover, they'll tuck, if they take it, they'll take a little breath and you can hit them in the head anyway. But if they tuck down their right elbow, take that left hook on the elbow, they're right there to hit in the chin. And that's how Jean Silva got to work against Arnold Allen. He was having a lot of trouble, came out southpaw to match Allen, which was interesting. And then eventually caught him by stepping in with a right hook to the body, left straight. And he landed that throughout the fight. This was a really interesting fight. There's a couple of things about Arnold Allen that I would love to change that I'll get into in a minute. But the things that he does well, man, he does well. He's always had these blisteringly fast hands. He's always been very good at moving the guy, like moving around the guy, getting the guy to sort of follow him. And just as the guy is stepping without thinking, just as he's getting into the pattern of following Arnold Allen will jack his head back with the fastest left straight you've seen. And that works great. I think that's fantastic. He also has a great low kicks off both legs. I do wish, because originally he came out and they were both southpaw, he threw a really good hard left low kick, which he doesn't get an awful lot of chances to do because he doesn't fight an awful lot of southpaws, whereas John Silva fights southpaws in every fight for some reason. But lands that great low kick, buckles the lead leg in. John Silva immediately changes back to his native orthodox stance. If you remember Islam Makhachev versus Jack Della Maddalena, fighting a switch hitter, the moment that you're in closed stance, throw the hard low kick on the outside of the leg because you can convince them to go back to the other stance. You can say, it'll be easier from there, you don't have to check. I mean, you still can low kick someone when they're in the same stance as you from that, from your back leg, but it won't buckle their leg inward, which is the one that does the real damage. But Allen also has a great step-up right calf kick against orthodox opponents, and I'm always pointing him out because it's him and Alex Pereira are like and Kopolov are the only guys in MMA who have a good lead leg step-up calf kick. Everyone else gets a good calf kick off their back leg, and then it works, and the opponent changes stances, and they can't keep calf kicking. It's like just step up and calf kick. It'll be slower until you drill it so it's fast, like Pereira. But John Silva, aside from being a crazy man and having his grappling a little bit exposed against Diego Lopez, I think he's a fantastic problem solver, and I've been saying that since his fight with, since I saw his fight with Kevin Vallejos. I thought he was fantastic in that fight. Kevin Vallejos wanted to box him, wanted to tear him up with combinations on the inside, very good at slipping punches and getting in with a couple of punches of his own afterwards. He's the sort of Mike Tyson prototype that everyone wants to see in MMA. John Silva's losing the boxing, so he says, well, why don't I throw some elbows? Because as I always say, like that sort of offensive counter punching where you slip and then you throw a counter combination with your hands doesn't exist in Muay Thai because you can either get clinched after your slip and first punch or elbowed in the head because you're hanging out in the pocket. So he throws a few elbows, Vallejos backs off, and then suddenly, I get to kick him. I can throw punches at him at long range. Vallejos is suddenly not going for the one area he feels comfortable. And there's been a few moments like that in John Silva fights where he's just worked a guy out. One of the things he hit on in this fight was something that I've seen in Arnold Allen for a while, and I always wanted to see someone do like an ankle tap to him. Arnold Allen, he's southpaw, and he'll circle around the opponent's lead leg by letting his rear foot drift around, like pivot around them. Which can be, it puts him behind the lead shoulder, which is great in boxing. If you go watch Miguel Cotto's middleweight run, like near the end of his career, he would break off these guys working against him by waiting for their right hand, pivoting off behind his lead shoulder, and being at like 90 degrees to them, and they'd have to turn around and face him. And that just breaks everything they're doing. They can't continue the combination. They can't just maul on him and lean on him. But in MMA and sports that allow kicking, we're going to do some pivot versus low kick discourse, which was all the rage on MMA Twitter last year. People be like, you can't pivot in MMA because you get low kicked. And other respected analysts being like, yes, you can. Watch so-and-so do a pivot. But the vulnerability is there. If you pivot, particularly if you pivot without stepping out first, you can cross your feet up and you put yourself in a bad situation balance-wise. So what I really want to see people do against Arnold Allen is step up and throw an ankle tap, which is like a slapping little low kick. It's a low kick that shouldn't even count as a low kick. Guys like Lyoto Machida and Wonderboy do it because it's a big thing in point fighting. You tap the guy's ankle just as he's starting to step or just as he's off balance, and then you come in with your punches afterwards. So I've been wanting to see someone do that to Arnold Allen for a while, but John Silva was just stepping his foot behind Allen's as he's tried to pivot off and pushing him. Like every exchange in this fight, he ended with a push and tried to trip him over his leg. And occasionally went southpaw and threw a couple of low kicks at him as he was pivoting too. So that pivot was getting Allen into trouble. The other thing that I don't like that Allen does, he works with Firas, and you can watch Firas's fighters like Rory McDonald do this. They get the high lead elbow and they roll down behind the lead shoulder, which is great. I want to see more people hiding behind the big bones of the shoulder, elbow, arm when they're when someone's throwing punches at them from punching range. But the great thing about the shoulder roll generally, or altogether, is not that it protects you, it's that it's a great platform for counter offense. So you take the punch on your shoulder or on your arm, you feel the punch land, they're close enough, so you just throw your rear hand as hard as you can. And Arnold Allen is covering up behind his lead shoulder with his high lead elbow, taking punches and then trying to walk away. And it just let John Silva land punches. There was a nice bit where he entered a clinch with an underhook off by rolling the elbow, by opening the elbow up after rolling down behind it. But for the most part, watch him use that shoulder roll. He doesn't counter off it once, I don't think. He just uses it to cover up. It's quite interesting because I've been watching a lot of Boots Ennis this week because I got distracted when I was talking about Andy Cruz, who's working with his dad, Bosie Ennis. But I was watching a lot of Boots Ennis, and Boots Ennis does something that Zab Judah used to do, but even more so. He's a southpaw, and he lands he uses the southpaw shoulder roll to set up the counter left uppercut. Because the shoulder roll is a little bit more porous and dangerous, even in boxing, when you're talking open stance, southpaw versus orthodox. It's doubly so in MMA because the guy can kick you in your open side and then only your arm can defend you. But the counter uppercut from that shoulder roll works really, really well. And Boots Ennis has been murdering people with that for a while. Gervonta Davis does it too, actually. Can't remember whose head Zab Judah almost popped off with it, but there was a really good one a few years ago. Might have been Cotto, and then he lost. Anyway, don't like that Arnold Allen is essentially floating, throwing his own punches, covering, and then just receiving the counter combination so that John Silva could just get back into it. Like, even if John Silva got his head popped back with the left straight, he could just come back and try and put 3 or 4 strikes on him and then off balance him at the end. And I think the thing is that, like, when Arnold Allen goes to that high elbow shoulder roll, I'm not saying he should counter every time. I'm not saying every time he should be looking to counter punch. I'm saying sometimes he should crash into a clinch and just take the clinch. But he was just sort of getting pushed around here. He was in a fight where he was faster than the guy, probably as physically strong as the guy. Maybe not the best hitter, maybe not as dangerous a hitter as the guy, but he was getting pushed around and made to look bad because he was off balance, because he was always pivoting with his rear foot behind his lead foot, and because he was always turning side on behind his shoulder and not capitalizing in any way. But a great performance out of John Silva. I mean, it was a great performance out of Arnold Allen. I would have loved another 2 rounds of this. I used to say, like, ranked fighters against each other, you should probably go 5 rounds, but I'm now of the opinion that we're not a real sport. Just say 5 rounds because people want it and we all know it's going to be a banger. Everyone knew before this event this would be the good fight on it. But I do wonder about Allen's training situation because he's a British lad based in his dad's back garden. And then he goes over to TriStar to train. I just don't know how well he gels with that style. But, I mean, he's had a lot of success. But on the subject of gelling with styles of the gym, we've got Song Yadong versus Sean O'Malley in the co-main. I could have seen this going both ways. I was sort of drifting off during a lot of this. It was only in like the last round that Sean O'Malley bothered doing anything. But Song Yadong, I've said it before, I was joking on the Patreon episode about how we're all just waiting for Song Yadong to arrive, but he is like 95 in all categories if this were a video game, but with the default moveset. There is no depth to his game at all. He's got a takedown. He's got a hard left hook. He's got a hard right hand. He's got a decent low kick. He throws the odd side kick so that we can go, oh, that's that Sander background. But he's the most, like, he went to Team Alpha Male as a talent and became the most generic fighter I've ever seen. In terms of combinations, it's step forward, left hook, right straight, step forward, right straight, left hook. Like, there's nothing more there. The one that did almost land a couple of times in this fight was right low kick to jumping left hook, which is a cool combination to have in the chamber, but just no volume. When he gets the takedown, he's not passing guard. He's not landing effective ground and pound. He spent a load of time working with Justin Flores, working his judo, because he was on my Instagram feed constantly demonstrating throws with Justin Flores, who rocks, by the way. Go check out all his stuff. But yeah, just came in with the most generic game plan, looking generic. And Sean O'Malley did his usual thing, front kicks, circling, the odd jab, mainly straights off the rear hand, switching stances, got taken down. It was honestly like the level of these. I always say there's no boring fights, no boring matchups at bantamweight. If you throw any 2 bantamweight names against each other, it'll be good. I've since amended that to say except Chito Vera, but someone said on Reddit that Sean O'Malley absorbed Chito's ability to do nothing. I felt like through round 1 and 2, I was watching a lot of that. But he still did enough to win on the judges' scorecard. So what was Song Yadong doing? Waldo Cortes Acosta knocked out Derrick Lewis. Derrick Lewis, who went on a podcast in the week and told everyone he was taking these peptides that the UFC had given him. Then the UFC scrambled and got Jeff Nowitzki to go and say that they didn't. Like, whatever he's taking, we definitely didn't give him. And if we did give him it, it was because it's been tested to not actually improve his performance at all. But, they've been giving him whatever. They've been giving him the peptides, the juice to get him back on form. And he still turned up and looked awful. Did the jumping bicycle kick that he does twice. Ran at Waldo Cortes Acosta. And Cortes Acosta didn't even have to pivot or circle off. He just backed up a couple of steps. And then Derrick Lewis would go, oh, that's a lot of work. And then eventually, that's literally how he won. In the second round, Derrick Lewis came off the fence swinging 2 punches. Waldo Cortes Acosta stepped back, and then he did a right straight without anything behind it. He just went, would have got you there, poked him on the chin. And Derrick Lewis went, oh, he would have, and just fell on the floor and gave up. It was just shit. I saw some people saying Derrick Lewis is operating the Bob Sapp game. I think Terence McKinney is operating the Bob Sapp game, which is try really hard for the first minute. And then if it doesn't go your way, lose quickly so that you don't end up in a drawn-out war for the same amount of money as if you just laid down now. Derrick Lewis is more Derrick Lewis's one fight's coming from behind, which you got to respect. In fact, John Anik read out the stat in 9 fights where he was getting outlanded, which is a hilarious betting stat. But he has, he's pretty past it now. He did just knock out Talison Teixeira, who they were like, he's big and he does boxing and elbows. And I remember that when that main event came along, I had to try and put a positive spin on it. I had to go and watch all of Talison Teixeira's dreadful regional fights and try and glean some info from him just knocking out gardeners and bin men. Anything else on this card that was good? Well, Umar Nurmagomedov versus Deiveson Figueiredo ran the risk of being good. But if you knew Deiveson Figueiredo, you knew, and Umar, you knew that this was going to be activity beating non-activity, but no damage happening. And literally that's what it was. Umar Nurmagomedov gets top position, makes a show of trying to land some strikes, but ultimately doesn't really land any strikes. And Figueiredo, there were moments in this where he was actually quite impressive. He fights like someone who's desperately holding back, kind of like Chito Vera. Chito Vera runs marathons every day in camp and then turns up and fights like he's terrified of getting tired. But Deiveson Figueiredo has never thrown more than 1 strike at a time. Umar moves him to the fence, gets the body lock, steps in the middle, tries to throw him. Figgy hops over the leg. Umar tries to take him backwards over the leg. Figgy hops over it again, hops over another one, escapes the clinch, has Umar's back to the cage, and he walks up to him like, oh, you're going to get it now. And then he doesn't. And then he throws a right hand and then pulls back and goes, oh, and then throws another naked right hand. It was just dreadful. He's cooked. He's cooked. It's just he always had low activity, and now he's cooked against good fighters. He'll probably beat some of the lower ranked guys still. He could probably fight Rob Font. I think the Rob Font fight was ideal for him because that's an opponent where you can lose 90% of the fight, land 1 good punch around, you'll win because Rob Font will just wobble and look like he's about to collapse at any moment. Umar, looking good, but equally his stock didn't rise because everyone was like, Umar, why aren't you actually hurting this guy? That was the one positive change coming to Paramount. The UFC's announced that the Fight of the Night and Performance of the Night bonuses are bumped to 100k, which is double, and they are setting a standard bonus for finishing at 25 grand. Now, he said Dana White claimed that they used to just mess with the numbers based on people's performances and not show it. It's like, bro, any hidden purse here is for your benefit. It's not for the benefit of the fighters. The UFC got a lot of goodwill based off Lyoto Machida saying he got given 5 grand in the changing room once by Dana. And for years, people have been like, well, you can't factor in locker room bonuses. Like it was a massive part of the UFC's business model. But a 25 grand or a large bonus for finishing is exactly what you need in this sport. Because there are plenty of fights where people dominate for 5 rounds and you go, that was more impressive than a quick knockout that could have just been luck. But the point of fighting is to render the opponent unable to fight you more. So give people bonuses for that. I think that's a great way. It's a move I applaud. Obviously, the purpose is to keep fighters placid while the amount of money the UFC takes in has so obviously increased massively. Ultimately, this is not going to be a huge amount of the revenue percentage. The revenue split is not going to change significantly because of this, but it makes a big difference to fighters' lives if they finish a fight and they get 25 grand. And it might even make the events better. Nikita Krylov knocked out Bukakis. Yeah, that was all right. Josh Hockett, I mean, he's cringe as hell in all the stuff I've seen outside the cage, but Denzel Freeman, he just broke him with, like, pace. He doesn't even look like he should be a heavyweight. He looks like he could make light heavyweight, but he's just bullying this guy around. It was actually quite fun to watch. I saw people liken him to, like, a really off-brand, supermarket-owned brand Cain Velasquez, because he's not great, but he is running these people ragged, and that's quite fun to watch, especially in the division, in the heavyweight division, where everyone's so scary until minute 3 when they're like, "Oh, I'm really tired now. Can we just agree to take a break?" Ty Miller knocked out Adam Fuggett because Adam Fuggett was doing Adam Fuggett things, which is throw a nice body kick and then hang around to see what happens. Literally all this guy's losses in the UFC, all his wins, this has happened. Throw a nice body kick, stand there, get cracked. Fuggett, to his credit, he was actually trying to body kick and then come into clinches and then rough him up with uppercuts on the inside, but he was still just hanging around too long a lot of the time. And then Alex Perez knocked out Charles Johnson. He missed weight. So Charles Johnson gets a slight bonus, but also not his win bonus, which is normally half of your earnings. So it is brutal. Like, someone did a breakdown of this a couple of years ago, like when weight missers won and lost. And it was something like 70% of the time, the guy who missed weight won if the opponent accepted the fight. So you give up 20% of your pay, but you are giving yourself a massively increased chance of winning. Perez here was just like right straights and shifting right hooks, but he looked prepared for that knee. Actually, for a start, this is a fight that can show you, like, Johnson is a good kicker. Perez is not a good kicker. But Perez threw a nice... Johnson was southpaw, Perez was orthodox. Perez threw a nice right low kick on the inside. Johnson picked his leg up and checked it. Perez took a break, and then he threw a right kick to the body. Johnson picked his lead leg up again and cross-checked it. And as Perez brought his leg back, he threw the right hand and moved in and threw a left hook and knocked Johnson down. Because if you can get the guy checking, you can get him standing still. Something we've been harping on about forever, but like low kicks, the point is not to get the guy to quit. It's kind of like body shots. Guys get hung up on the body shot knockout, and they're cool to see, but like that's not the point of the body shot most of the time. Body shots are to slow the guy down and to land and to make openings for stuff later on. The point of low kicks is to slow the guy down. And if he checks, you can exploit that. Go watch the study I did on Yuki Yosa on the YouTube channel, which has got like 100,000 views now, which is doing really well for something that I made. I normally am not very good on the old clickbaiting and YouTube algorithm stuff. But, anyone who's good at kickboxing fights in a way that exploits the opponent checking their kicks. MMA, there's this thing where like you throw the low kicks, you throw the calf kick as hard as you can and as often as you can until the opponent checks it and you go, oh my God, I might break my leg. Better stop throwing those calf kicks. Whereas good fighters will then go right onto layer 2 of the striking. And then Charles Johnson was reeling from this and he kept trying to land knees as Perez closed in on him on the cage, which would ordinarily be a good strike to try and intercept the guy with. But if you're already hurt, trying to get big risk, high reward connections on the back foot is a little bit dangerous. And Perez looked like he'd trained for it because both times he'd slipped his right shoulder in, turned his body sideways, came back with the left hook, knocked Johnson down. Brilliant knockout for Perez. Shame he missed weight, but, knocking people out gets you goodwill. Even if you miss weight ridiculously, multiple times, and you've cancelled 9 fights in like the last 3 years. So that was the event. It was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I did a video before it, and I'm hoping to, before next week's UFC Volkanovski versus Lopez 2, I'm hoping to get a video up about that first fight as well. So keep your eyes peeled on the YouTube channel. Go read the Roberto Duran Advanced Striking 2.0, Bridging the Gap, Jab and Dip stuff. Sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, and be a boy. I'm your boy, Jack Slack, and I will catch you on the Patreon later in the week for the Boycast. Finally, some good fucking fights. Bless.